I understand you and your mother were in the car when you heard about the announcement of Kamala Harris for vice president. Tell us what happened.
I nearly swerved off the road. We were visiting my mom's sister in Lowndes County, Alabama. So we were actually on Highway 80, that infamous journey from Selma to Montgomery, and we were headed back to Selma. And when we heard on the radio the announcement on Sirius on CNN, my mom, who is a life member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, literally started crying. I think that her emotions were so full as an African-American woman herself in politics. My mom has always been my role model. She was actually the first African-American woman to sit on the city council in Selma. So she's a bit of a trailblazer herself. But the fact that we have an African-American woman on the ticket, that she's lived to see an African-American president and now an African-American woman vice presidential candidate, she was just overjoyed. Aside from the fact that she is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and has been a lifetime member. She's one of those golden sorors. Actually, she's headed towards platinum. She's been 50 years plus in the sorority. So we're excited about that. You know, I think that it's not just about the sisterhood, because it's really more about the Divine Nine. We know how important the African-American to African-Americans, the fraternities and sororities are working together hand in glove. They will be a formidable, coalition to get out the vote. Right.
And the Divine Nine, our HBCUs. Now, wait a minute, Congresswoman, your mother's an AK. Did you pledge? Are you Greek?
Absolutely. You know, I'm an Alpha Kappa. I mean, I may be wearing red, but it okay. Really is intensified pink is what you're looking at.
That's what I thought.
In fact, I'm a silver soror. I've been 25 years plus in Alpha Kappa Alpha. And when I arrived at my college, they didn't have a chapter. But needless to say, when I left my college, they had a chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha. I went to Princeton University, and I helped charter the first chapter. It was a city chapter, and really excited about that. So yes, I am. But you know, at the end of the day, this is really about the American people. It's about choosing someone who will be ready day one to take over the presidency. And it's about restoring dignity. As Joe Biden says, we really are trying to redeem the soul of this nation. When I think of how this president has really run our country into the ground, literally. What's at stake on the ballot is not only our livelihoods when we think about the economic crisis that we're in now caused by a public health crisis, but we're also on the ballot is our very lives as African Americans are dying disproportionately from COVID-19. And of course, what is also on our ballot is our democracy, saving our democracy. And nothing was more sacrosanct to John Lewis than the right to vote. He famously said that it was the most powerful nonviolent tool in our democracy. And our vote is at stake as this president is trying to undermine the U.S. Postal Service and at every turn is trying to invalidate vote by mail. So we really have our work cut out, but we have an amazing ticket in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, and I noticed you've been tweeting a lot about the Postal Service. You know, COVID is one thing, mail-in ballots are one thing, but how many people, I mean, so many people today get their prescriptions through the mail, Congresswoman. So, I mean, how many people are endangered, who you talk about life and death, like right now at this very moment, I heard General Russell Honore say on television, his prescriptions as a senior citizen have not arrived. So now he has to go to the drugstore and hope he can buy them or pay for them out of pocket or whatever. But the mail service itself, what Trump is doing to that, is endangering people's lives right now.
Absolutely. You know that the VA system sends all of its medicine through the mail. So what we are really, it's not just our senior citizens at risk, but it's also our veterans at risk and not receiving their medicines. Likewise, given this pandemic, more and more of us are being safer at home or ordering things. So the delivery service has been disrupted as well. And so I look forward, Nancy Pelosi has announced, we had a caucus call this morning, that we're coming back from our August recess because House Democrats understand that we must do something now to shore up, to provide resources to the U.S. Postal Service so that they can meet the needs of the American people. And that's everyday needs of the American people as well as ballots.
And this obviously, in terms of the ballots, is the latest form of voter suppression. Down through the years has always been, we have to give it to our enemies. They can be very creative when it comes to voter suppression, whether gerrymandering or counting jelly beans in a jar. Now they're just going to shut down the mail. Can you imagine what John Lewis would have said about what's happening to the Postal Service?
Absolutely. It's as if old battles have become new again. While we no longer have to pass a literacy test in order to register to vote, there are modern day forms of voter suppression, gerrymandering, purging of rolls,
Right.
Closing down polling stations without adequate notice. And all of that really stems from the fact that the Shelby versus Holder decision, the Supreme Court gutted the pre-clearance provisions and enforceability provisions of the Voting Rights Act. And in nullifying that, they gave a challenge to Congress to order to fully restore the protections of the Voting Rights Act. We had to come up with a modern day formula to determine which states have had a history of voter discrimination such that they needed to have every voting law pre-cleared by Congress. And so, look, if I had my druthers, I think voting is so important that every state should have to go through the rigors of federal oversight in changing their voting laws. But we know that that is quite expensive and it's not within the political will of the Republican Party. But you and I both know that voting rights used to not be a partisan issue. It used to be pretty nonpartisan. In fact, the Voting Rights Act was fully restored, was fully authorized for 25 years back in 2006 under George W. Bush.
Right.
But I think that our Republican colleagues have realized that they can actually change elections by stopping certain people from voting.
Yeah, and making sure that not enough people are voting. I know the speaker even said it appears that the president is afraid of the American people and voting. So that's why you want to minimize. So she has called you all back in to session. Is that correct?
She has, to take up a bill that would provide more additional resources, money, to the United States Postal Service. We currently have a Postmaster General who doesn't know anything about the Postal Service. He's a longtime friend and donor, $1 million donor to Donald Trump. And he's come in and has gotten rid of overtime. And you and I both know that these are frontline essential workers, our postal delivery men and women who literally working around the clock to make sure, as you said, that our medicine, that our food, so many people are dependent upon their everyday needs being delivered given this COVID pandemic. So we're going to take up a bill. There's going to be a series of hearings that the Oversight Committee will undertake, but we're going to take up a bill, and it looks like we're going to go back on Saturday to vote on that bill. I'm not sure what Mitch McConnell will do. He may do what he has done with 275 other pieces of bipartisan legislation that the House Democrats have passed, including, by the way, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020, which would help fully restore the Voting Rights Act. Mitch McConnell has literally, and the Senate and the Republicans generally have shown that they don't really care about the American public. And for the president to think that he can really solve anything with these executive orders, which were pretty meaningless if you think about it. I mean, you can only get pandemic insurance if you're extra money, if your state actually antes up 1/4 of it. So I think that what the American people desperately need is for us to act as a Congress. And if the president won't act and the Republicans won't act, we House Democrats will do our part. You know, we passed 3 months ago, the HEROES Act, to give another round of stimulus checks, to give more money for election protection, to give an election assistance as well, to give more money for nutritional assistance. So many schools are starting back without having adequate PPE, and our HEROES Act would have fully funded all of that. But you know, the Republicans really in the White House refused to act. And so the consequences is that we're going to go back now and pass a bill specifically targeted at funding the U.S. Postal Service and trying to make sure that that all of the shenanigans that this White House is trying to do won't occur for this election.
You mentioned the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Is there any indication of late that Mitch McConnell is going to do anything at all with that bill?
No, there isn't. You know, what really hurt my heart is to listen to Mitch McConnell at one of the honoring ceremonies as John Lewis lay in state in the United States Capitol. He, as a leader of the Republican Party and as the president of the Senate, gave remarks, and he gave such accolades about John, talked about his character and his values. But you know, all of that rings hollow if you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is and actually pass legislation that would fully restore the Voting Rights Act. The legacy, if we want to honor the legacy of John Lewis, then we will honor his life's work, which was voting rights. And we, the people, will do what we can in every election to vote, that whether it's federal, state, or local. And we as legislators can do our part, federal legislators, and pass a bill that would fully restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965.